Hey everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and today we've got another In Conversation With. I'm joined by an MVP, Microsoft Certified Trainer, public speaker, plural site author, a programmer. In fact, you name it, this guy has probably done it. I'm really excited today to be joined by Peter Gallagher. So, hi Pete, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Good, yeah, not bad. Yeah. I think it's now 12:30. We started recording about 9:30.
You're not wrong.
No, thank you very much for having me on the show.
No, not at all, and thanks for putting up with my constant recording and stopping and recording. Because that's the way you've got to do these things.
Yeah, no, it was enlightening. It was awesome. Thank you.
No. Honestly, Pete, thanks for joining me. I know we've spoken virtually over the last few months, and I think I've been following your kind of output into the community for the last sort of 5 or 6 months. I think it is now, and I'm really, feeling great to have you on this episode with me because, like I say, I know we've spoken with each other virtually over the last few months, and I think you've inspired me to do quite a lot of good things with IoT and robot arms and Raspberry Pi. So really wanted to get you on the show, really, just to kind of, allow people to see what I see, and really what makes me motivated to do the kind of things that you're doing in the community. So on that note, I don't know if you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction, let the people know who you are, what you do, where you come from, all that good stuff, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. You did such a good job. I don't feel like I need to almost. But yeah, I'm a freelance software engineer. I specialize in the IoT space mainly. Although I'll do pretty much anything someone will pay me to do. That's what happens when you run your own company. But yeah, IoT is what floats my boat. So I tend to specialize in that area and Azure in particular. So I'm an Azure MVP. I'm also a certified trainer as well. And then recently I've become a Pluralsight author. Actually, it's been about a year since I've been a Pluralsight author, but recently I've started authoring courses. So there's a few of those going on there. And I also speak at public events, mainly on IoT, funnily enough. And I also organise 2 or 3 different meetup groups in Nottingham, Knots IoT and .NET Knots and Knots Dev Workshop. And then I'm involved in another group called Lati in Loughborough, and I'm also a member of a podcast called the Agile Engineering Podcast, and I also go on Twitch every now and again on my own channel, but also as part of the Azure-ish live channel as well with Liam Gulliver and Jonathan Ralph. And in fact, yeah, very,
and I'm
very
repping the t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I like to keep myself busy. Obviously, I blog and I go on and do these sorts of talks with fabulous people like you as well. So
well, no, thank you, Pete. But no, absolutely. I think when do you get time to do anything else, Pete? I think you look at what you're up to at the moment. Just on the socials that you put out there, it truly is brilliant stuff that you're putting out there. I think for me, so I mean, this obviously this show is not about me, but I think really just to kind of set the scene with the audience why I felt I needed to invite you on this is because personally I'm your typical infrastructure kind of operations guy. I've dabbled with development in days gone by. I can just about do enough to be dangerous with PowerShell and a bit of bash script now and again, but I in the days that I cast my mind back sort of 10, 11 years ago, I did a little bit of ASP.NET and a bit of web development back in the day, but I personally have not really touched that for a long time. So what's kind of invoked me into kind of looking back into the IoT and really getting to grips with that is this whole move to the cloud. I think has kind of enabled me, I suppose, to start looking at it. And certainly with Azure and what they've got to offer from an IoT perspective, it's kind of allowed me to tinker, I suppose, a little bit. And this is where I saw what you were doing, and I think I think it may have even been DevOps Derek's talk that you did with him a few months back. I caught your conversation with Derek there, and some of the stuff that you're up to, I thought what Pete is doing is exactly what I want to be doing almost. Do you know what I mean? To that extent, just tinkering, making things work, and just having a play with things. So I just don't know if you want to explain how you came to be this brilliant all-rounder, really, in an IoT sense. How did your kind of job career get you to this point, to where you are today, and where are you going in the future, I suppose? So quite a massive question.
Space. Just to latch on to what you were saying there, I mean, what I like to do is try and do exactly what you're talking about there, is inspire people. And so I tend to try and concentrate on the it kind of seems like the lower level stuff, but it really isn't. It's getting people off that blank page and into IoT, and then from that point on, showing them the stepping stones they need to be able to advance their knowledge. And obviously, things like Azure are fantastic. The whole IoT infrastructure has been democratized now, so that we've got access to it. And the vast majority of this stuff is free. We need to buy hardware at some point, but and I'll perhaps talk about it later, but you don't even need to do that necessarily to get feet wet in IoT. But I mean, for me, I started doing IoT way back like 1999, essentially. My first job, I took over some software where we had Royal Mail stamp vending machines dotted around the country, and they had modems in them. And we could dial into these stamp vending machines and pull out the audit trails and event history and stuff like that. I think there was about 20 or 30 of them dotted around the country. So I didn't write that software, but when I leapt into it, it was mostly written, but I carried on maintaining it and developing it. So that sort of... and even before that, at college, I was fascinated by electronics. I did electronics and electrical engineering at college and then university. So I've kind of been stuck in this world by my own volition for decades now, and I'm really enjoying it. And I mean, I did that company made change machines, cash handling equipment, and I was there for 12 years before I was made redundant. And then at that point, that company closed, and I started up on my own because I had a few clients, and I was doing desktop applications and WordPress websites and anything people would pay me to do, and I still support that stuff these days. And in fact, I still consult for a version of that original company now, still doing stuff in assembler even 2 weeks ago, I was doing stuff in assembler. I must be one of the few people who do microchip assembly programming. But I quite enjoy it. You get down to that sort of low level stuff. But it wasn't until sort of Raspberry Pi came out that it really sort of got me back interested in IoT again. And I guess Azure was on the up then as well, and you mentioned it there, where you see sort of what the potential is for a cloud platform like that, and you add the I onto the OT, because obviously stuff modems in it. It's not really the internet, and more and more modern stuff that we had even a decade ago had really basic internet connectivity stuff in there, but the cloud wasn't really a thing. Sort of 12 years ago or something like that. So seeing the Azure stuff come alive, and then when I saw IoT hubs, then I immediately spotted that was an awesome thing to go and learn. So I mean that sort of brings us almost up to date, and we can fill in the rest as we go. No,
absolutely, Pete. And I think what did it for me is that that memory. So I did GCSE electronics. I think it was the last time I can wire a plug, of course, and that kind of stuff. But the thought of getting a breadboard and a couple of bits of wire, a few components, follow a bit of a schematic, understand what you're trying to do, but not just plumb it all in together, but now go onto a computer and write a bit of code, and rather than using the mechanical buttons or bits of wire and making LEDs flash, but let the computer do that. That was the thing for me, that it kind of enabled me to brush up on a bit of a programming. I learned programming concepts and programming basics, and so I know what a class and a method and a function is. So I think it's probably fair to say personally I've got a bit of a bearing of the basics of programming, but I suppose it's just enabling you to go in and use that programming language to do something in the physical world that kind of really got me going with it. So I think in looking at some of the things that you guys were up to with Azure Live, and obviously the stuff that you did, I think you did a Git Watcher on one of the episodes. You had a couple of episodes where you're programming that. I thought that's brilliant. And then I think you showed the robot arm, and I was like, right, I'm sold. That was it. And we were on Twitter, weren't we? And you kind of sent me a link for a 3D printer, and it was like, I've just bought it, Pete. So
it is dangerous. A number of times that people, normally people will come to my talks, and then I'll get DMs in Twitter, and it'll be people saying, I've just bought all of this kit. I think I'm bankrupting people as I'm just traveling around speaking to people virtually.
Do you know what? Not far off, Pete. Yeah, it was like, right, okay, so hang on a second. How many servos do I need? I need a breadboard. I need some. Well, I did actually go off and buy one of these little IoT sensor kits off Amazon. I thought, Is that how you see people generally start off, or do you see, how do you see it? Because you are, take this the right way, and I'm not blowing smoke, but you are an inspirational guy, Pete, no other way of putting it. That I think when you show these things, I think to the right people online, the videos you do, it's that spark, it's like that realization that no matter what you're currently doing or what you're working as, when you kind of branch over to the IoT world, it's almost like you're in this Alice in Wonderland zone. Is that the best way to put it? That you just get all these bits and do stuff with it, So how do you normally see people, get into that area, and what kind of backgrounds are they from? Are they, generally?
Loads of different backgrounds, actually. What is common, though, is that nearly always you can go in a room and you can say, who's got a Raspberry Pi? And half of the room will put the hand up. And it's not as much the case now, but certainly 2 years ago when you asked that question and then you said, and where is it? Most people would say in a drawer.
Yeah.
Because they bought it and they just didn't know what to do with it after that. And some people then would just go online and go, oh, I'll make it into a Kodi box, which I've done, of course, or a Pi hole, which I've done, or, a NAS, or any number of different things, or maybe a security camera, stuff that you don't have to do any programming or have any fun with, really. It's still a good result. You can still watch your movies and, share your files around your house and stuff. And so, I mean, that's about as advanced as people often take it, because getting off that blank sheet, as you've said, wiring components together can sometimes be daunting. Because, and not because you think you're going to hurt yourself, but because you maybe think you're going to blow your Raspberry Pi up by wiring it up wrong. It's actually quite hard to do, although very possible. So I quite like showing people the real basics. So get an LED and a resistor and a button and some wires, and sort of just show them how to plug that together, and then show them the basics of how then to control that. And I used to do, most of my talks were in Node, although I did a little bit of Python as well to begin with. But more recently, of course, we can do this all with .NET Core or .NET 5. And so I've been concentrating on that area, because obviously there's a great glut of C# programmers out there that would love to get into IoT, but just, they look and they go, I don't really want to have to do JavaScript, or I don't want to have to do Python. But if you can do it with C#, then you've got access to this massive developer base of people that have got this experience skill already, and all they need then is to transpose that across to IoT. There is more to it than that, because you do need some understanding of how the real-time world works. I can get my teeth in. But the language concepts are all there.
I was going to say, Pete, that's a really interesting point you raised there about going to .NET over something like Python, because even for me, when I was you would have seen that the last kind of 3-4 months I've been doing this 100 Days of Cloud challenge, and for me personally, I wanted to set my goals on relearning a particular programming language, and at the time it was, right, do I stick with what I know? I say what I know, what I've used in the past to a limited extent, that I kind of know around, or do I choose something like one of the more, I don't know if it's a modern language or more kind of abstracted language where there's no curly brackets, something like Python. So I think I rushed off, bought a Python book, and I think I was speaking with you on Twitter, because I think I mentioned, oh look, I've just run my first program. I've put the hello world in Python, and I've now done it on an LED and got it to flash. And I think you said at the time, yeah, that'll work as well. And that kind of resonated with me, because I think at the time I wasn't fully aware that you were a .NET programmer, essentially. And then when you showed me that link about how you'd written that script to get .NET installed onto a Raspberry Pi, I thought, oh, okay, right. And of course, the robot arm kind of gave me that opportunity to follow your... and to be honest, I'll probably end up putting the links under the video to your Git repo, where you've built... And you actually did the session for the festive tech calendar as well, didn't you? Of course. Yes. Oh no, that was the Santa Claus. Mailing.
No, I didn't. Yep. No, I did a festive tech calendar as well of my own, doing a workshop version of that robot arm. Exactly.
Of course you did. I thought I'd seen it on that as well. So it's like at that moment I thought, actually, let's give this .NET thing a go. And I think I ran the scripts from your Git repo, got .NET installed, followed your Git repo, and got that basic program up and running. And from there, I managed to get... I'd love to talk all the way through that robot arm thing and talk about everything you've got going on, but maybe we will in a second. But I think my point here is, when you're trying to choose, like, if you're somebody like me who's an infrastructure operations guy that doesn't really work in that day-to-day dev world, I suppose what I'm trying to say to those people is, jump over. It's really good fun. You know what I mean? It's you can learn a lot from it. You know, and you don't necessarily have to, you know, choose one language or another. You can just jump straight in with kind of any language that you kind of find attractive to you. So, I mean, do you see that more often than not? That, like you say, there's a glut of people that use C# and .NET currently. Equally, do you deal a lot with people that are kind of learning the Python side of things as well?
Yes, I mean, universities are using Python regularly now. Although some institutions are using .NET as well, interestingly. Some of the stats that came out of Build showed that I think it was something ridiculous. It was a really high percentage. I can't remember what the number was now of new .NET programmers are university students or college students. Which I found really interesting because I had no idea. I don't know what the demographic is or how it spreads across the world. But certainly the uni students that I've spoken to in this country tend to use Python quite a lot.
Okay.
And there's a really good reason for that in that obviously a lot of ML and AI stuff is done in Python. It's a really powerful language. I mean, I've never gotten over the fact that tab meant something. So I think that was one of the things that put me off Python a little bit. That's just me being a bit silly about it, really. I like Python. It's good. It's really good for beginners because, as you say, there's no curly brackets all over the place and weird arrows and stuff that you've got to get used to, and you know the more in-depth stuff that you're going to see in C#. But I think the .NET folks are putting in quite a lot of effort, especially with these top-level programs that they've got going on. I forget what the actual acronym is now, where they've stripped out the vast majority of the program, and you can just write "Hello World" in like 3 lines for a console app. So that is going to help because you know you spin up a console app, and although it's quite simple for "Hello World," there is a fair amount of code there compared to a Python app that you start up. So I think it will help people.
So no, absolutely, and I think, you know, just going back to the example I kind of followed through with you, which was you know, building the firmware in .NET, building your server and your client side app. Again, I'll relate this to my personal experience, and some people will laugh about it, but when I back in the day when I did a bit of web development, if you want to call it that, there wasn't any of this kind of assembly or kind of framework for building websites. There was literally HTML and JavaScript and fill your boots. Maybe if you had a copy of Dreamweaver flying around, you can do a bit of what you see is what you get kind of development. But I remember at the time developing a whole load of SOAP web services. So they were kind of sat on a web server, and they were kind of what I can't try and relate to as this microservices type thing now. So they were individual unique web services that, you know, built with SOAP, which as I understand it, that is still living in some guise within .NET at the moment.
Probably.
Yeah. And what I found more intriguing when I followed your article through was around the things like the Blazor WebAssembly and how, as a .NET developer, you can carry on, because it used to be the code behind. I recall with ASP.NET, you could get all your functionality onto your client side by, you know, typing in all that code behind and all that kind of stuff. Am I on the right track, Pete? Is that kind of where we're going? Like with the WebAssembly, the Blazor WebAssembly is like a thing that launches into your Internet Explorer and runs your client side program, is what I understand it to be.
Internet Explorer. Oh, crikey.
Well, Edge.
I mean, Blazor's amazing. And the whole point of Blazor is you can use a C# code on the client. So you don't need to write JavaScript anymore. And again, people do and don't like. It's very Marmitey JavaScript. But if you're going to do web dev, it's very difficult to get away from JavaScript. And even if you're going to do Blazor at this moment in time, chances are you're still going to need some Blazor, some JavaScript interop, as it might be called, I think, where you can hook into that JavaScript system. And we did a little bit of that, I think, with that Santa's letter. Showing how to get that working as well. But no, and this is leveraging that massive amount of C# knowledge that's out there, that skill base then to be able to make web apps. And this has been tried to be done many times. You've talked about ASP.NET. I think it's Web Forms or something is the example you're talking about there. But there's also Silverlight that they tried. And that was fantastic, actually. Really, really clever kit. And then obviously, browser plugins died. But then Steve Sanderson came up with Blazor. There's also Uno platform though. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're making a cross-platform UI framework, and that can spin up not BlazorWASM. It can spin up a WebAssembly projects, but it's all in XAML and C#, so it's still C#.
Okay.
It's a UWP application that can run on Windows, Linux, Mac.
Okay,
WASM,
so it truly
Android,
is cross-platform.
iOS.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it gives you everything all together in one place, and they're building on that constantly. And Jerome Laban and the team, I've been talking to them quite a lot recently, actually, because I wanted to give it a go, and I've been able to spin up a UWP app on a Raspberry Pi, essentially. And I've got it now in VS Code where I can just hit F5 and it'll build on my dev machine and compile it for the Linux binaries, and then it'll copy it across to the Raspberry Pi, and it'll fire up in debug mode a UWP app on the Pi. And I've got some sliders, and you can see the console log for the values changing in code from like a VNC session on my Pi. It's amazing.
That's pretty
actually.
cool. Yeah,
Pretty cool.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that kind of summarizes the fun you can kind of have. I don't know, is fun the right word? Somebody might be watching this going, what's going on? What's being talked about? But I think the message I'm kind of trying to say here, really, from my perspective, is look, I'm not a dev. I'm not a dev by a long shot. However, it's maybe not as difficult as you might think to jump into that world. And I think once you jump into that world, you can relate it back to that infrastructure ops kind of role quite quickly. I think it's probably fair to say. And you can make your life a lot easier, is what I'm finding now, just by tinkering with these things. So, I mean, on that note, Pete, I don't know if you want to divert slightly and talk about the Pi and maybe how we hook things into IoT and IoT Hub, because essentially, Azure IoT Hub, IoT Central, you've got a couple of key components there that. How would somebody that, maybe they don't have a Pi, do they go out and buy, 40, 50 quid Raspberry Pi and a case and a card? Or is there an easier way of doing it, do you think? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my most popular talks, and one I really enjoy giving, is called IoT with nothing but your laptop. And you really can get into IoT with just your browser these days. And so that means if you've got a Chromebook, then you can sit there and you can do IoT. That's all you need. And you mentioned Azure's IoT offerings. They're the IoT Hub and IoT Central and things like that. And they're fantastic. For the people that might not know, IoT Hub is essentially a little cloud gateway. I say little. It allows you to connect millions of devices to Azure and ingress trillions of messages simultaneously. It's like if you've ever seen those old telephone switchboards where you have all the wires connected together, well, this is like that, but you never get a dial, never get a busy tone. These messages will always get ingressed.
So those messages, Pete, those messages, they could be anything that you as a dev or a programmer want to send from a device, or they could be you've bought some, like a temperature sensor or humidity, and it could be that constant stream of data from that device. Is that what we're talking about in terms of what those messages are that go up to IoT Hub?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, there's sort of almost two different sorts of messages. You could send what's called telemetry, which is what you're talking about there, where you're, say, sending temperature, humidity, or, perhaps you're monitoring some sort of a machine that's constantly spinning and it's splurting out this great stream of data, and you can send all that lot up. But you can also send like alert messages. Maybe there was a machine burst into flames or something, and you want an alert to go up, and you can send that sort of message.
That could happen in my office, Pete. That could happen with my robot arm, actually. Yeah, just looking at it.
It is, yeah. Or just all the electronics I've got dotted around. It is possible. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, IoT Hub sits at the edge of the cloud, essentially. So it's the arbiter of the messages, and then allows you to send those messages on to the rest of Azure. So you could send that just to storage if you wanted to, or you could send it on to just straight to a web app, or you could send it to an Azure function and then process that data, or stream analytics, or time series insights. And there's so many different services that you can send that on to.
I suppose it could act as a trigger, so it'll go in. The messages go into the queue, into the IoT Hub, and that could then, like you say, be alerted, alert an Azure function or whatever it may be. This is where you could go into the serverless compute side of things, I guess, within Azure, and do something. I mean, it's so powerful. I suppose is the message there, isn't it? You can do whatever it is you want to do, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean it's built on something called event hubs, but event
Yeah.
hubs is
Okay.
one way generally, so that'll be from the device up to the cloud. But IoT hubs takes that further and allows you to be able to send messages from the IoT hub back down to the device. So, say
Okay.
you have got like a logging interval or something like that, and you're checking temperatures every 5 minutes, and you say, "All right, well, I want to do it every 10 minutes now." You can control that from the IoT hub side of things, so from the Azure side of things,
With you.
which you wouldn't be
Okay.
able to do with event hubs. And there's things like device twins as well. So this is like
Yeah,
an
I've heard a little bit about these device twins. So that's almost
yeah.
like, my understanding is you've got this image of your device in digital form in Azure that you can kind of tweak and change, is it? And that copies down to your device. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so there's two different terms that are easily mixed up, but are very similar in concept. So you've got the digital twins, which is this Industry 4.0 idea where you model your whole infrastructure down to a digital level, so you can then simulate stuff without the real devices. But there's also a device twin in IoT hubs, which is a similar sort of idea. So it's a little JSON document that lives in the IoT hub. And you have, amongst other things, desired properties and reported properties. The desired properties you set on the IoT hub, and they get sent down to the device. So that might be something like I've just mentioned, like a logging interval or something like that, or when you need to wake up from deep sleep or something. And then you've got reported properties, which would be, say, I don't know, your location that you're getting from a GPS that doesn't change very often, maybe. So it's not
Yeah.
telemetry; it's more a fixed item. Or things like that. So that's how that is working. So the device can send that up to the IoT hub and it stores it in this JSON document. What's great about it, though, is that if the device is offline most of the time, you can set these desired properties in the cloud against the device. And then when the device connects, it'll get an update for that particular
Okay.
twin and it can update itself. So you can use it for things like long running jobs as well. So if there's like a load of firmware updates that you want to do, then you can track the progress using the device twin.
So if I wasn't on the camera now, Pete, I'd be furiously scribbling down notes now because this is like in my mind, in my kind of layman's terms way, I suppose, of looking at it, is that this is the kind of thing I was thinking with the robot arm. It's just more of a gimmick. It doesn't necessarily have to be the robot arm, but it's just four motors that do something. Is to hook it into IoT Hub and just get messages sent to and from. I mean, could I do something like, have a little LCD display on my robot arm and send a message through my Blazor web app that when I'm moving it, it'll show Jonnychipz on the LCD and, report that message through IoT Hub so we could maybe see how many times Jonnychipz has moved the arm. We could do that kind of stuff, I'm assuming, with it.
You could, although there's sort of a difference between, sort of what I've done with that robot arm project is that I've used something called Signal R. So Signal R is meant for real-time control. The most obvious thing that you ever see done with Signal R is a chat app. So what happens is somebody sends a message from one browser and it goes through a Signal R hub and it goes out onto the other browser. But like a chat app, you don't want to have to wait. So it needs to be real-time. So what I've done with the demo application there in Blazor is I've got a few sliders on the screen, and as you move the slider, the robot arm is moving in sync with that. I wouldn't try. I mean, you can absolutely do what you like, and you can absolutely send messages through the IoT hub down to the device to tell it to move, but you're sort of beholden then to that whole concept of it going through like almost a whispering system where you're going through another service in the way, whereas with the at least with the Signal R hub that I've done, that's in the Blazor app and the Pi connects to that directly, so the latency should be a lot less.
Yeah,
so you will hit latency.
Yeah.
You will hit latency problems, but absolutely you can do what you want. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to think of ways in which to kind of just play and use it. Maybe like you say, leave the servos on using Signal R because it's a real time thing. It's that that speed of response, and then anything else, any other little sensors I can put around it. I was thinking, flashing lights on the robot arm, and make that web page accessible, to the outside world, obviously through a container or something, and then allow people through the browser to switch lights on and off on, put a camera on the arm. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's just tinkering, isn't it? And it's back to the realms of, like you said earlier, who's got a Raspberry Pi? Well, I had one for years. I was one of those people that had a Raspberry Pi sat in a drawer. Absolutely, it's like, I'm not necessarily a Linux guy. I'm a Windows guy through and through. The thought of spinning up a command line interface and getting something to do something is, I could work my way through it, but the GUI is far easier, isn't it? Let's face it. And I'm kind of using that as a generalization, because I think that's where probably a lot of people maybe are at the moment in terms of, do they shy away from these things because, Linux, all these funny sudo commands and, make dir and what, it's a case of, is there an easy way? Is there an easy way to get into kind of just having a little tinker and a little play with these kind of things in your experience, Pete?
Yep, absolutely. And I've got some websites I can show you here, actually, that are perfect for this sort of thing. So, you mentioned there about sort of that step that you need to get over, where it's not as simple as just buying a Raspberry Pi. You have to buy a Raspberry Pi, and if you're lucky, it comes with an SD card with Raspbian on it, but you do need to put it in there and plug in a keyboard and a mouse and a monitor, and then update the software, and then it's like, now I don't know what to do. And so then you're off searching the internet for bits of code, and you're not quite sure what it is that you need to do with it. And if you want to do Node, then you're going to have to put a version of Node on there that's better than the version that comes with the Pi. And Python's great, and there's some fantastic resources. I mean, what's great about the Pi community is it's awesome, and they're so helpful, and there's so much information out there. So you find very little gatekeeping in the Pi community as well, because Eben Upton designed this for this reason, because he, like a lot of us of a certain age, went to school and we were playing with a BBC Micro in the classroom. And we were playing with Spectrums or Commodore 64s, or if you were lucky enough, BBCs at home.
The little turtle, the little turtle, I seem to remember, that used to go around the floor and draw a big line. That's the one. Yeah, I remember
exactly.
That one.
That's right. Yeah. So most of the people that are our age, our experience of growing up as a kid, probably there was a certain amount of programming, even if it was 10 print hello, 20 go to 10.
Yeah.
There was still programming, but children of, say, less than 20 or 20 and less, they've grown up with iPads and Android tablets and phones and things like that, and Xbox consoles and PlayStations. And there's not a single bit of programming involved in any of that. So there's nothing to... We were kind of almost forced into doing sort of some level of programming, even if it was just learning how to start a tape. And talking old tech now, but we were exposed to it. And Eben Upton spotted that certainly the numbers of people going into IT and programming were dropping. And part of this was just because there wasn't something that was affordable and powerful enough to be able to then play with this sort of stuff. So that's where this came from. But to take that all the way back again, there's still a learning path that you've got to go through there before you even start plugging stuff in. But what you can see on here is one of very many different IoT simulators that are available. This one in particular is made by Microsoft. It's a Raspberry Pi simulator of sorts. What we've got on the left-hand side is just an example circuit. This circuit doesn't do anything. I can't drag anything around on there. It's just, this is what the circuit is. So it's got an LED, and then this little BME 280, which is a temperature, humidity, and pressure monitor that you can just buy. But this shows you how to wire that up to your Pi. Really, they should have a resistor for this LED. It's a little bit naughty of them not having a resistor, but we'll forgive them because of what's on the right-hand side. So over here is some node code. It's jumping around a little bit, isn't it? So I can't zoom out and zoom in particularly well on here because of what it's doing. But either way, we've got some node code that we can actually modify and use here if we want to. But when you first start it up, this is the only part that you need to have any interest in, this particular line. And in fact, let me just do this. Make life a bit easier. There we go. And start to zoom it up, and then I can zoom in a little bit more, and then we can see what we're doing. So there's just a connection string here. Now, this connection string is an Azure IoT Hub connection string, and this is the only part that you need to get from somewhere. But there is actually help up here, and it'll guide you through all the steps that you need to be able to use this simulator. So if what you're interested in is, look, I really want to play with the cloud stuff. I've got a Raspberry Pi, but learning the cloud stuff is what I'm really interested in. And this will skip you past all of the stuff that you need to learn about getting your Pi all set up, and just get you on the first steps to getting your IoT Hub set up. So I mean, you can just go to the portal, portal.azure.com, and set yourself up with a free Azure account. And there's a free tier IoT Hub. It's got some limitations, but for the most part, it's exactly like a regular IoT Hub, and you can just use it. And I've got a IoT Hub already set up. In fact, I've got loads of them already set up. This one here is the one that I'm interested in particular, but you can create a new one of those. And again, this IoT Hub, this sits at the edge of Azure, and it's like an interface between your devices and the rest of Azure.
Okay.
And you go in there and you can create yourself an IoT device. I'm not going to spend too long on this part because I just want to show you the basics. And I've set up a bunch of IoT devices in here already. And once you've got that IoT device set up, then you can go into it and you can grab that connection string, which once it's finished retrieving the device information, it will give me. Of course, it's going to be slow today because we're recording.
No, absolutely. And I think it's I mean, it's interesting to see that so Microsoft have got these simulators built in that you don't need to go out and buy a breadboard and a Raspberry Pi. And I use the GPIO little card that kind of plugs onto the board, and then you've got. Is that right, Pete? You've got pin number, the card numbering, and there's another type of numbering, the board numbering system. It's learning all of that kind of stuff, isn't it? That I found doing it with the physical device, if you like.
Yes, yeah. So there's the board numbering scheme. I mean, in .NET specifically, but also in other languages as well. You've got the board numbering scheme and then the BCM numbering scheme.
That's it. Yeah.
So all of the GPIO on the Raspberry Pi is controlled with a BCM chip. So the pinouts actually on the BCM chip, you can use those directly. And so sometimes you'll get these little GPIO cheat sheets with the numbering schemes on there.
Yeah.
And you'll see those two different sorts of numbering schemes on there. Sometimes you might even see three, because Wiring Pi, up until relatively recently, was another numbering scheme that came from Arduino. So you had three to choose from, but in .NET land, then we've just got board numbering or BCM. I stick with board numbering because I can literally count the number of pins, and I'm not going to convert to anything else. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with Azure today. It's balked, but you go into that device there, and you grab that connection string, and you paste it into your simulator in here, and it looks like that. So that's kind of what that connection string looks like.
That's it. That just comes up at the top, doesn't it? Under the summary normally, up at the IoT Hub. You've got it there. Yeah, that's right. I've seen that. Yeah.
I don't know. Something wrong with Azure today. It's having a bit of a problem.
On a go slow. Yeah.
Exactly. You could just click the copy button next to that primary connection string and then paste it in here. It'll actually say that originally. And you can just paste it in. And once you do that, then you can hit the run button there. And that starts sending messages up to the IoT Hub. But once you're doing that, of course, that's great. But it looks like nothing's happening. But you can get this little free open source piece of software called the Azure IoT Explorer. And what that'll do is hook itself up to your IoT Hub. And then you can monitor those messages that have been sent by that device. So I've opened it up, and you'll need a different connection string. You'll need an IoT Hub owner shared access policy connection string. So that's the IoT Hub level. So what we had before was the device level. Each device will get its own connection credentials, and none of them can see each other, and they can't do anything to the hub. But the level we're talking about, I mean, this IoT Explorer will allow you full control over the hub. So it's a completely different level of access.
I'm with you.
And it'll list all your devices for you there. So there's the same Raspberry Pi and MX Chip 1 and stuff that I had there before. And you can see now back on devices, look, it's actually saying connected because I've connected that simulator. But if I go into that Raspberry Pi and I click telemetry and start, we should start seeing those messages that simulator's sending arriving in this application. And there they are, look. So that's Raspberry Pi web client. So that's going from my browser up to the IoT Hub. And then I've got this IoT Hub, this Azure IoT Explorer running on my PC, and that's monitoring those same messages. So this is like hello world for Azure IoT Hubs. This is just, it's working. I've got everything set up, and now I can sort of see how that infrastructure's working. And then you're free to do what you want. But you can see, we were talking about the difference between telemetry and alerts, for instance. But you can also put things like alerts in here, look. So what it's saying is the temperature alert is false. But if you actually have a look at that code, if that simulated temperature goes over a certain value, then that temperature alert will change to true. And then you can route messages based on those properties to different endpoints after that. So it might be that you've got like hot and cold storage. So stuff that like all of these messages with that temperature alert false, you can just stick in blob storage. It's harder to access, but it's dead cheap. But you can't do very much in the way of reporting with it very easily. Power BI, I know, can do stuff with it. And there we are. Temperature alert equals true look if you see look, because the temperature went over a certain value, it's come back down to false. But maybe when it's a temperature alert is true, maybe your machine's overheating, or, you know, God forbid your house on fire or something, then that needs to go somewhere else. And you could either send that just to like warm storage and you can report on it later, or you could send it out if you wanted to a Logic app. And then whatever you want with a Logic app, you could have it send you a text message or a tweet out, or do some sentiment analysis somewhere, or, you know, anything you like at that point. Or as you mentioned earlier, you could stick it on a service bus or something like that, and you could grab it off a queue and do something with that, or stick it on an event hub.
Especially when you see the other plethora of products that, you know, maybe aren't native Azure products, but certainly when you look at the 365 side with Power Apps and Power Automate and all that kind of stuff, you can see that, wow, you know, you've got quite a lot of power at your fingertips. And like you say, Pete, a lot of this you can get on with free accounts, and you get a certain level of authentication and credits that you can spend even with the free accounts. And that's to be honest, Pete, if only I'd have seen that when I was tinkering. I did it the hard way. Well, it was hard for me, where you could program that message. You could program like an asynchronous message or an asynchronous method or function that would hook into that and show you all of those messages in the output window of your terminal. If only I'd have known about that, that would have made my life so much easier.
You can do this in VS Code as well. In fact, if I just get VS Code open there quickly. And then just put this down here. I
suppose, Pete, while you're doing that, it's like, for me, it's important to try and get over that, you know, how does this relate to the average person? If you're not a tinkerer, how can you relate this to your everyday job, you know, in terms of, okay, I guess if you're not working with IoT a lot of the time, then yes, you can tinker in your house, do what I've done, buy a little inventor's kit with a few sensors and just have a little play. Personally, for me, it just helps, you know, cement some of those ideas around programming and getting things to talk to each other. But how does this relate in the business world, Pete? You know, how can we relate what we're talking about now to, you know, your average operations guy or infrastructure guy or you know, IT business person? What we're talking about now is essentially development. But are there any kind of starter for 10 projects that we could maybe dip into with IoT, or is it that we have to jump into programming and we have to jump into components and sensors?
No, not at all. And in fact, just before I do that, I'll just show you that you've got this same. In fact, I've got an Edge hub there I've connected to there, and a Raspberry Pi on it. But we can do what I was doing earlier. So if you are a programmer, you do use VS Code, then there's an extension, an IoT toolkit that you can use. And you can do all your monitoring there. So I can start monitoring that built-in event endpoint there. And that will bring the messages directly into VS Code. So you don't need to leave that environment. So that's kind of what that is. But you can do all sorts of other things like create devices and generate SAS tokens. And you can send cloud-to-device messages and device-to-cloud messages and all sorts. So that's pretty powerful just in IoT Hub. So to pivot across to what you were saying there, this isn't necessarily... If perhaps this is a little bit more advanced than you want to start, the place that I actually point people is towards something called a microbit. Now, a microbit, it was kind of really developed for sort of middle grade children, really, if you will, young adults.
I've got one on the floor by here somewhere, but I can't see it, so I'd wave it. Yeah.
Hold on.
No, it's not. It's behind me. It's behind me in the kit. Yeah.
I've got it. I can do that.
I think didn't BBC they made all of these a good about 6 or 7 years ago, and were they going to ship them to all the schools, Pete? Wasn't that the case?
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, and I mean, and they did. I think they shipped like 1 million or something ridiculous. A lot of devices out. So this is basically a microcontroller sitting in the middle there, and it's got a couple of buttons on the front. And a display in the middle is just a grid of LEDs, but it's also got a gyroscope in there and a magnetometer and a rudimentary temperature sensor in there as well. And you can use, funnily enough, with a bit of magical electronics wizardry, you can use these LEDs as sensors as well. So you can use them as light sensors. Wow. Now, the latest version of this board, which this is the latest one, you can tell because it's got this little gold microbit symbol at the top there. This has also got a speaker on board and a microphone. So you can do some quite cool stuff with that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because like, I remember when they came out, because I've always been quite a big advocate of sort of computer science, or at least, you know, kind of systems thinking with kids. And, you know, I know you've got young kids, Pete. I've got young kids going through they just out of primary now, but when these got released, I was like, yes, finally, you know, they're going to bring it in, because I think they'd used to that point, it was things like Scratch and programming initiatives and within schools that I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that side, Pete. But
Scratch is awesome. I love Scratch.
Not with Scratch, but I think just the general education system and how they're introduced. I think it's very hit and miss across the country. I know certain, it's there's probably a little bit more to be desired, is my experience. So I think when those Microbits were released, it was like, that, like you just said earlier, that harps back to when the BBC Micro computers were kind of launched when, you know, like you say, we were kids, you know, and it's like done the full circle. So, you know, would you say that's a great place to start in, you know, if you don't want to go and, you know, get a Raspberry Pi, if maybe the simulator looks a little bit maybe out of your depth at the minute, do you think one of those Microbits is a good place to start for most?
Yeah, let me show you why it's such a great place to start. This is MakeCode. So this is a Microsoft product for the Microbit. And what you get here on the left-hand side is a simulated Microbit. And on the right-hand side, it's a Scratch-like language. So I can drag an icon on here on start. And on the left-hand side, you'll see we get the simulated heart. So you got this immediate response there. But even better than that, you can drag like buttons on there. So you've got two buttons, A and B. And drag two buttons on there, let's change that to a B, and then we can show different icons for them. There we are. So let's put that there, just random icons and that, and then I can press these buttons. Now you mentioned Scratch, so children and also the educators will recognize that language. So you're not asking them to do a big pivot and to having to program. But what's beautiful is that you can actually do that if you want to. So if you've been doing Scratch, but now you want to move on, you can actually program this in Python or JavaScript if you want.
Cool.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah. All on its own. But this is more powerful than just that. We were talking about robot arms earlier, weren't we? So if I scroll down and click on this pins, then if I drag this servo right pin on there, and I do that again. Servo right pin. I'm not used to being this zoomed in. And change that to 0. Now, see at the bottom there? We've actually got a servo appeared automatically.
Nice, okay,
and if I press these buttons, you can watch that servo and it moves. Now, what you've made is a rudimentary robot arm there. I can drag another one on and you'll get two servos.
Pete, that's far too easy. The degree of movement there, you don't have to put in all these funny numbers, you know, it's...
But I mean, what's really cool is you can actually move that, because this has got a magnetometer and a gyroscope in there. So you can use the gyroscope if you want to be able to move your robot arm. So that angle, you just need to convert that angle to the servo angle there.
Hang on,
and off you go.
Yeah, okay. So that's cool.
What's really cool is, though, this thing, you plug it in via USB to your computer. And once you've done that, all you need to do is hit that download button. And if you're on Windows, most of the time, it will download it straight to the Microbit and you're off and running. You hook your servo up like this and it'll just work for the most part. Yeah. Often you'll need a little battery pack to plug into it to make it work properly. But also, if you've got that plugged into your computer, you've actually got serial out. So I've used a Microbit specifically just for its sensors, and I've connected that to a Raspberry Pi, and then you can send out the serial information about them angles, for instance, to the Pi, and let the Pi remotely control the Microbit. Okay. But what's even more cool is that you can hook two Microbits together with radio. And that's dead easy. That same pieces of code you can see there. And so you have one Microbit plugged in via serial to the Pi and the other Microbit remotely, and you can use it as a remote for your robot arm.
Wow. Yeah. How far does that go, Pete? Is that just from the transmitter on the Microbits themselves, yeah?
Yes. Yeah. It goes really far. I mean, line of sight sort of thing. It's, tens of meters away.
Oh, dear.
It's pretty powerful.
You know what's coming, Pete, don't you? You know what's coming. There's going to be... I'm going to be controlling everything with microbits now. But
Yeah.
I mean, this is great stuff. I mean, to be honest, this is brilliant for getting into this kind of world, I suppose. Because honestly, I mean, just from my point of view, that I suppose it's the same for a lot of people. Where do you find the time? We all work 9 to 5s. We finish. We got family. We
Just
want a bit of
9 to 5?
downtime. Yeah,
You're
well,
lucky.
I'm using that as Dolly Parton would say anyway. But yeah, but where do you find the time? And I suppose you've just demonstrated there in the space of all 5 minutes that with a simulator you can at least start to get your heads around Scratch style programming there with a microbit. You've got a similar kind of environment with the Raspberry Pi, and then you can kind of build and layer it, I suppose. And then
There is another layer as well.
Go for it, Pete.
There is. So I mean, we've talked about the microbit and we've talked about the Raspberry Pi, but one of the biggest catalysts in the IoT world is the Arduino. And I know before we went on air, you showed me you had this Arduino board, which looked fantastic. I've not seen it before. An Arduino Uno Maker or something, I think you called it, didn't you?
Yeah, it's a Maker 1. It's Maker 1.
I've not seen that before.
Maker Uno Plus it is, yeah. It's only about £8-9, I think it was, from the Pi Hut, so it wasn't a massive amount of money.
Yep. And these are fantastic. These are little microcontrollers again. So, I mean, there's a difference here. So, the microbit and Arduinos, they're microcontrollers. So, they're little devices and they've got all the memory and everything all built into them. And you kind of program that device. And then there's like other chips around it that might do some I/O. But generally, all of that logic and everything's built into the device. The Raspberry Pi is a full computer. So it runs Linux and it needs a keyboard and a mouse potentially and an internet connection and stuff like that. So there's a difference there. But if you start looking at Arduino programming, and I don't know what your knowledge level's at with Arduino, but do you know what you normally program it in?
No, you tell me, Pete. This is new to me.
C. It's C or C++.
Yep.
Now, if you're a beginner, how good do you think your C knowledge might be as a beginner?
Not brilliant. I wouldn't have thought. Yeah,
C# is easier than C. C is hard.
Did you say Pete? Did you say C++ or C++?
Yes. It's either C or C++. It depends on how you look at it. It's a version of C++, really.
Okay.
But I tend to just boil it down to C.
Okay.
Because it's not quite as powerful as that, although it is a powerful language. But again, there's a simulator for Arduino. So there's something here called Tinkercad, and it's made by the same people that make AutoCAD. And this is really cool. So, I mean, it's basically a circuit playground. So I can drag components onto here. So I can drag that on there and drag a big old battery on there and connect these two things together like that. And then press Start Simulation. And it doesn't work. And you know why it doesn't work? Because these are the wrong way around. Oops. So delete this, delete that. You've got to get these the right way around, you see.
Yeah.
Plug that into there, start simulation, and then we get an LED flashing. It's actually a bit more powerful than that as well. So if I wire it up without the resistor, watch what it does.
Explodes.
So you get that. Yeah. Current through the LED is 915 milliamps, while absolute maximum is 20 milliamps. So it's telling you, and it will go and smoke will come out. But I mean, what this is doing is allowing you to be able to learn the basics of the electronics without actually blowing anything up, which is usually, like I said earlier, that's actually the thing that puts people off quite a lot. Is I bought this and it's actually reasonably expensive, and I just don't, it's kind of a blocker, even if it's subconscious. Actually, I don't want to break anything, and that's common in not only in this sort of a world, but also computers in general. People, certainly your aunts and your uncles who perhaps don't do this, it's like they ring the likes of us to fix it because they don't want to break anything. Whereas we'll just have a go at it because we know perhaps we've got the knowledge.
And it's fair enough, Pete. I think because I mean, not the breadboard I got sat next to me now, but when I did one of those little matrix displays. And they can get quite hefty with the wires and quite intricate with how you've got to, I did a little TikTok video, I don't know if you saw it, but wires everywhere just to wire up this little matrix display that you could, send letters across essentially. And there was a big stack of, 220 ohm resistors in there. I think that, they only have to touch each other and you're kind of shorting them out. And it's quite easily done, isn't it? It's not... But like you say, equally,
in electronics,
just get on it.
No, equally in electronics, absolutely, it is very easy to blow something up. You accidentally put 12 volts into your Pi and
Yeah.
and your Pi is dead. So it is absolutely possible. But if you're following the instructions, it's fine. But again, if you do something like this, then you can just have a play and you're off and running. But what's cool about this is if I scroll down far enough, there's an Arduino Uno and now a Microbit as well. But if I drag the Arduino Uno on there, and it's massive as well, and I can drop that somewhere around there and just move my resistor and LED over, and I can connect one side to ground. In fact, let's not do that side to ground, so I think it needs to be the other way around. Let's do this side to ground and then that side down there to pin 7. And what's happened over here is we've got this extra little button for code. And if I click that, look what we get. We get that Scratch-based language instead. Cool. So I can delete this stuff that's there. Oops, I've deleted the wrong thing there. I've deleted my
wires
connection. I've done it on 8.
So you can export that after then, Pete, can you? So you can program in Scratch and you can kind of export. Oh, well, sorry.
Spoiler
alert. Go on, keep going.
Yeah.
I'm watching, going. Wow, I can,
Yeah, no, you can't do that.
You can't do it yet. You're going to put it in there now, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So this is now Scratch-based language. So I can do that. Set pin 8 to low, and assuming that I've got this wired up correctly, if I press start simulation, and I probably haven't got it connected up properly, I need to back my wires back off again. I can never, I've been doing.
I think the kinky leg's the positive, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There we are. I've been doing this for years, and you'd have thought I'd know by now. But there we are. Look, there's a flashing LED, and I've written all that in just Scratch. But I mean, what you can do is, if I stop that again, then there's a way, and I can't quite remember how you do it. But blocks. There we are. Look, if I go to text and continue, then there's the C code, and so it's creating the C code in the background. But even better than that, because you can just go to cut out that spoiler, is I can download that code directly. And it downloads it as a .ino file. So if you've ever done any Arduino programming, then that's what you're going to be using as a .ino file, at least for the main part of the project. And I can click on that, and you won't be able to see what it's doing. I'll move it down onto the screen in a second. And there we are. And there's our code loaded into Arduino Studio. And assuming that you've got an Arduino actually plugged in, then you'll be able to set the serial port and the board, and then hit this program button, the upload button, and it will just work. So that's as much as you need to do. But that also applies, to the make code as well. So as I say, you're not stuck in the simulator. Just press that download button and it'll go on your actual physical make code device, which is fantastic. This Raspberry Pi code as well, that's just node code. So for the most part, you can copy and paste that as well.
So within the space of 15 minutes, Pete, you programmed a Microbit, an Arduino, and a Raspberry Pi. And I mean, you're knocking all these barriers to entry down, really, aren't you? I think is the point here, is that I can't express how it's one of those things when you say to somebody, "Oh, look, it's really good fun," and people think, "Oh, are you being a little bit cliche about it?" And no, it's not. It's really good fun. Do you know what I mean? It's like get involved and have a play, and the stuff I've learned by following the guides that you've written, Pete, the kind of little nudges you give me on Twitter and things like that, it just opens. In my opinion, opens up the world quite massively. Certain concept and certain ways of working, to bring back into my day job, which is what I'm doing it for, obviously, for those kind of learnings. So, I mean, have you got anything else there, Pete, on that you wanted to run through? Because I know, I mean, the point. No, honestly, Pete, we could make a 3-hour epic here, I think, couldn't we? But I'm not sure many people would get to the end. But
some people would.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly. Microsoft have created.
Take your time, Pete. Honestly, this is all brilliant stuff. So don't let me rush anything.
Or watch on 2x or whatever. It's fine.
I'll put little markers. This is where we do something incredible, and
That's
this is where Pete does something incredible.
So Microsoft have created, in conjunction with another company here, this MX chip board, and it's it looks very much like this Microbit, doesn't it? If you look at it with that same sort of edge connector interface at the bottom, and they've got an OLED instead of a bunch of LEDs, but they've got 2 buttons. It's also got a gyroscope and a magnetometer and temperature sensor and all that sort of stuff built into it too. But this is an Arduino board essentially. And again, you're going to be programming it in C. So this is going to be C on the left-hand side. You can't modify this C. This is just their demo code, but you can take this code. It's all open source. You can take that code and use it. But if I scroll back across here, then and zoom out a little bit because I can't get to it all, and then use zoom it, then you can see down here we've got a very similar looking thing to what we had in the Raspberry Pi simulator with the connection string. Now you can actually deploy these services in Azure directly. You just need to hook your Azure account up, and I think it uses ARM templates, and it'll actually deploy an IoT hub for you and a device and everything. So you wouldn't even need to do those steps manually, but I sort of implore you to do these steps manually because they're not hard. Follow the Raspberry Pi simulator instructions and it will show you how to do it. If you're just going to do it this way, you're kind of going to miss that step a little bit. So I think it's better for you to create it yourself and you'll learn a little bit more. But, each to their own. So once you've got that connection string, then you can hit this run button and it does some stuff down here. I can zoom back in again now. It says press A to shake. If you've got a real one, and this will work with a real device, then it wants you to shake the device, look. And then it's making sure the dev kit's okay. And then it's making sure that Azure's okay. And then it's actually checking Twitter after that, but we could ignore that bit. But what it's done is sent this heartbeat up there. So I wasn't actually monitoring, but if I press start monitoring and back over here again and stop it and start it again and do that again. Press A. Hello. That's it. Shake it. And then we can flick over to here. And there we are. Look, that's actually already got it. So that was the message it sent on that previous run. Yeah. So this is a very similar demo to the Raspberry Pi demo. It's a bit simpler, but obviously this gives you the facility to get started with this MX chip device. Now, the reason why this MX chip device is cool is because obviously Microsoft have designed it and its code, or at least the open source code there, to integrate with quite a lot of the more fundamental services that IoT Hub gives you. And one of them is the device provisioning service. And that's fantastic. And that's about provisioning devices at scale. And so you just got a list of devices and then the device connects and it automatically gets its credentials and off it goes. So there's some extra stuff that it's going to give you access to there that the Raspberry Pi simulator code isn't. So perhaps you can use this as like a step up to be able to see how that works. And then obviously the idea is you go and get the device for yourself and start playing with the code for real and modifying it and making it work how you want. But again, getting off that blank sheet for people, giving them something that already works. And then if they can replicate it on the real hardware, now that works, then they can start playing with code. And I mean, this speaks to me again from that boyhood stuff of playing with the Spectrum and typing in code from magazines. Which people still do, but it's online now. It's on Stack Overflow. But you still modify that and make it work for yourself. But again, all of this IoT Hub stuff, Microsoft obviously realized that it's powerful, it makes them a lot of money, and people using it is how that works. But there's actually an exam called AZ220. I was involved in creating this exam, this certification, IoT developer speciality certification. And what this does is teach you about if you're studying to pass the exam, then you will learn the whole of the IoT platform from Microsoft, and that'll take you everything from IoT hubs through IoT Edge and a little bit about Stream Analytics, time series insights through IoT Central. And IoT Central is software as a service, a SaaS offering from Microsoft that sort of gives you all of these bits that I was talking about, but as a package. You don't need to worry about hooking them up and making them work and paying for them individually. What you get is you get time series insights built into it, and you get the device provisioning service built into it, and an IoT hub built into it, and you get the Power BI style dashboarding built into it. So you get all of these things there for you, and you kind of just need to drag and drop stuff around to make that work. Obviously, you pay a premium for that. I forget what it is. I think it's about 50p a device per month or something. So it can add up. You get a couple of free devices. So again, as with everything, there's a free tier. You get 2 free devices and each get 30,000 messages a month to play with. So you can get started with that for nothing as well. And then every device you add will cost you 50p a month. And, that's not all that much. If you're lucky enough to be an MVP, or perhaps you've got MSDN credits or something like that, then you can use them towards stuff like this as well. So that's cool. But anyway, this exam will, going ahead and passing that will sort of give you some credibility in the IoT space. And if you wanted to go then, and maybe you're in a parallel career path and you wanted to switch across to something more IoT based, then this will give you that, not only the confidence that the stuff, but when you go for that job, you can present the fact that you've got this 220 certification, and that'll give you some extra leverage to either get the job or get a pay rise or something along those lines. It's really worthwhile having.
No, absolutely. And Pete, this is again, a couple of months back, I think you mentioned to me that you were involved with writing this particular, or the writing of this exam, and it's definitely something I'm personally looking to go through, because I think there's a great deal of learning materials as well. But have you got any hints or tips or other courseware maybe to be to kind of help with that?
Yep, definitely the place to start is the MS Learn pages, and they have got, there's the docs side, and if you're going to pass the exam, you're going to need to look at the docs, and that's just how it's going to work. But to be able to study and understand the concepts, then if you go to the docs.microsoft.com and into the Learn section, then if you select the products down here and just select IoT, then you can see there's a wealth of curated learning here, and this is step-by-step instructions, clearly explained, some with videos and some with actual sandbox accounts. So if you don't want to actually create yourself an Azure account, you can spin up just a sandbox account for free, and you've got access then to all of these services for nothing, for like 2 to 3 hours, the length of time it'll take you to go through one of these modules. And look, there's so much on there that you can go through, and there's 2 pages of that. Introduction for ML ops on IoT Edge, and securely connecting devices to the cloud, and just an introduction to the IoT Hub there. So that's fantastic. And if you were to go through a majority of those, then that's going to be something worthwhile doing. Actually, funnily enough, at the moment, there's something called the Learn It 30 Days to Learn It challenge that Microsoft have just launched. And the whole idea of that is that they give you these, let's see if I can find it actually, 30.
I think it's a cloud skills challenge, isn't it, Pete? Isn't it one of those?
That's exactly what it is.
That's it, yeah. I think I signed up for it, actually. I think it's on, are we on about, I think we've got about 10, 12 days left on it, I think. Or does it kick off when you start, I think it is?
That one, that's what it is. Yeah, so it's going to go on for a little while. And there's paths here for all sorts of different things. IoT developers, the one that I'm going to advocate you go and choose, and that'll give you a bunch of IoT developer stuff that you can go, so you can continue. I've started. I'm kind of teaching myself old tricks there, but I'm continually learning all the time. So
it's interesting to say, actually, because I'm forever going back to MS Learn to go through stuff that you think but go through the MS, because Microsoft have put a hell of a lot of investment into the Learn site now, haven't they, Pete? I think
it's awesome.
Yeah. So even if you think you know it, go back and review some of the new modules, because there's always something to learn. There's always something more to learn about. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, onwards from that, of course, maybe running through modules like this isn't what you get triggered by, or not what works well for you. So myself and a few other authors have started creating courses tailored towards helping people pass that AZ220 exam. So I've got 4 courses out there at the moment. I've got another 4 to come. There's another couple of authors out there, Jürgen and Reza, are creating courses in this same path as well. And so it's well worth going and checking those out. So obviously, that I was involved in creating the exam, so I'd hope that my content is quite well tailored to the content that you're going to have on the exam. But I've kind of tried to step back a little bit and teach people the concepts they need for the exam, rather than teach people the answers. So what you won't find in there is the answers to these questions, but the learning is targeted to the stuff that you're going to find in the exam. But certainly that first create and configure, like you can see, that's an hour and 12 minutes long, that course. I've made that purposefully big, because that is the fundamentals of this whole exam, and pretty much the whole of the Azure IoT infrastructure. But then they get shorter depending on what it is you're doing there. So 25 minutes, 14 minutes, 24 minutes. This exam alert is really cool that I've just done, because that is like all of the key bits of learning. You can't pass the exam just by watching it, but if you finish watching those courses, you can go back, watch the exam alert, and then at the end of each section, I've got a bunch of scenarios and little tests which are similar but not the same as the exam, but they will test whether or not you've taken in the relevant pieces of knowledge to be able to pass the exam.
Okay, yeah, no, that's cool.
So,
No, that's really good. Well, I mean, to be honest, Pete, we could go on and on and on talking all night, couldn't we? I mean, what else? What haven't we covered? I mean, to have you got anything else that you want to run through there now, Pete? Because that's that's fantastic. Everything that you've just shown.
No, I mean, I'm not quite sure when this is going out, this show, but tomorrow we've got the all-around Azure IoT event happening. Now, all of this will be recorded, so if this show goes out after tomorrow at 11 a.m. GMT, then you can catch up on this later. But this event, me and Paul DiCarlo and a bunch of the Microsoft IoT team have been involved in getting this event off the ground, and essentially it's a walk around all of the different IoT sections of Azure here, and there's 5 different short sessions, so 10 to 15 minutes long introductory sessions on various different services from IoT to ML and AI and that sort of stuff. So
so that's the 19th of Jan. You're on that, and so this video will be dropping out on the 21st. So yeah, it'll be on Thursday. This is going out. So well, obviously, did you say all that's recorded, Pete? So it's all
we'll be on YouTube. Yeah, it's actually in 3 different time zones across the world. So it's all in English. This one. But there might be future events that will target for different languages. But you can go back and watch these on YouTube later. So yeah, well worth doing.
No, I suppose we can't leave a talk, Pete, without mentioning the Azure guy, Azure-ish Live and Azure-ish Twitch stream that you Liam and Jonathan do. So, I mean, what's on the horizon for that at the moment, Pete? Have you only got any grand plans coming up? Because I know obviously we've had this nice break over Christmas and the New Year, and I think everybody's feeling a bit January now. So we've all got to get back into the swing of things now, haven't we?
Yes, I mean, there's 2 different sections, several different arms to Azure Live, actually. I mean, look at this. This is Liam and Isadora playing Among Us. So we do Azure-ish After Dark. And this is Liam and Jonathan have jumped up this idea, and we bring on guests and we play Among Us, and we just grill them about tech. Their tech that they're interested in and what they're doing as part of their job. And it's a really good idea, actually, because it sort of breaks down that normal barrier that you get where sort of people are talking to a screen and don't really know what to say next, and perhaps it's been a bit driven. And this is very fluid and very off the cuff sort of conversational talk, and I really like that because the conversation goes down different paths and you find out different things and people are more relaxed, and it's in the evening as well. So if it's your thing to have a drink in the evening, then you can absolutely have a glass of wine while you're doing it, or a glass of beer or whatever.
Makes for a better show then, of course. No doubt.
If that's your thing, and it is my thing, then absolutely. But also we do a show every fortnight as well, just the regular Azure-ish Live show. Now, before Christmas, we were building, you mentioned the Git Watcher. And again, Liam and Jonathan are putting the glut of work in here, and I kind of just freeload to a degree. So they've done a lot of the work in behind the scenes with like just spiking various different ideas and making sure that what we're going to do sort of works, and then we build it live on air.
Yeah.
And so most of the time I'm sort of asking them, why are you doing it that way? Can you not just do it this way? And they explain then the reasoning behind it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned I do quite a lot, so I kind of find it difficult to do everything I want to do, but I do need to pull my finger out a little bit more and help.
Well, I mean, to be honest, Pete, even the stuff that I've got on at the moment, you know what I mean? I take on, just building a little bit of an electronic, circuit, and I think, oh, I want to get back around to that, but I want to do this, I want to do that. I think I just don't know how you manage, to be honest, Pete. It just seems like you're the busiest man in the community at the moment. I just see the Twitter, it's like you're doing this. I mean, it's brilliant though. I mean, it's just so fantastic to see, because I mean, to kind of bring it back down, I suppose, to why I invited you on the show to begin with. I think the passion shines through clearly. Everything we've just gone through there now. How to knock down barriers to look. I'm like I said, I'll repeat it. I'm not a developer, far from it. But if I can jump in and I can print off this big purple robot arm and get a couple of servos and hook it up to a Raspberry Pi, then I'm pretty sure most people can. So I think it's just about getting involved, Pete, I think, and like I say, I'll certainly be putting links to your GitHub repo, in the video below, and all all the things that you guys are up to with Azure-ish Live as well, because I mean, it all adds to the community, and it's really fantastic stuff.
Yeah, we got Chris Reddington on after dark, I think. Liam's
Yeah.
organised for Chris Reddington to come on. He's a fast track, senior fast track person for
Yeah.
the Azure as an Azure engineer at Microsoft. So that's going to be interesting to find out what it is that he's doing.
Yeah,
that,
no,
so.
I think I've had a chat with Chris now. I think we'll have Chris on one of the In Conversation with soon as well over the next few weeks. So I mean, it's great stuff. Pete, what else could we talk about now? How long are we looking? An hour and a quarter. We could go on. I mean, there's so much here. I'm just looking to the side of me now. What else can we talk about? But I mean, is there anything else we can dip into now for the last couple of minutes, Pete? Or are you happy with that? Because yeah, we could.
I could talk all night.
No, absolutely. I mean, God, right. Hang on a minute. Let me look around the room now. I'm not going to edit this out.
There's the podcast. Don't forget about that.
Absolutely.
The Agile Engineering podcast is well worth listening to. So that's Liam Gulliver, Jonathan Rolfe, Misha Bell, and Louise Paling, and myself. We often get a guest on for that as well. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss this week's recording. We record tomorrow.
Okay.
I forget who the guest is, but I'm actually judging an IoT hack. Paul Michaels and Kevin Smith are running a mini hack. They've run a mini hack series, and they've flavoured it with IoT this month, and they've brought me in to judge it, which is going to be really good fun. It just so happened that it clashed with the podcast recording tomorrow. Tomorrow is a mental day with all around Azure IoT, and then potentially there was the podcast recording and also the IoT mini hack stuff. So that was a relatively busy day tomorrow.
So yeah, so get a good night's sleep, Pete. Busy day tomorrow, but I think we'll leave it there, Pete. I mean, thank you so much again for coming on. It's really been a pleasure to have you on. I think anybody that watches this video back through, obviously go and follow Pete on Twitter, because I think the amount of knowledge that you're constantly putting out into the world is stuff that people really need to look into. And I sincerely mean that, Pete. It's been really great. So.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. Thanks a lot, Pete, for coming on today. Like I say, no doubt we'll catch up in the future. But for now, thanks for coming, Pete.
Thanks very much, John. Cheers.